Before starting off with each topic in the history of modern India, let me take you through a timeline with some important events of modern Indian history to get a sense of the subject at a very broad level. The history of modern India is largely centered around Indian encounters with the Europeans, and they are specifically the ones in Western Europe. That is a curious fact, isn't it? So, how did that happen? Well, India was widely known for its spices, textiles, precious stones, and other commodities, which fetched high prices in the European markets. But when the Ottoman Empire captured Constantinople in the 1453, the direct contact between the Europeans and India is declined. To re-establish the stable in the Western European countries like Spain and Portugal invested their resources to find the trading sea route to India. One of these earliest expeditions was led by the Vasco da Gama, a Portuguese explorer. He succeeded in reaching India to an old sea route circling Africa at the Cape of Good Hope to reach Calicut in 1498. Over the next few years, the Portuguese started establishing factories and settlements in the coastal regions of India. And to oversee these developments, the Portuguese also appointed the governors in India. Next European traders to arrive in India were the Dutch. In 1602, the Dutch East India Company was formed. The Dutch mostly had their eye on establishing trade in the East Indies, the region presently known as Indonesia. They also had trading centers in India where they set up many factories. Then came English. They came just behind the Dutch in Surat in 1608. They hoped to establish the textile factories in Surat but were unsuccessful as the Mughals declined the offers due to the Portuguese influence. This convinced the English that overcoming the Portuguese was a means to establish trading in India. Hence, in 1612, the English defeated the Portuguese naval squadrons at Swali near Surat, went themselves to Mughal support to establish factories in Surat and 1613. By 1619, they had received permission to establish many other factories in India. In 1620, the Danes arrived in India. They also established factories in India, but they were known for their missionary activities rather than commerce. Meanwhile, the Dutch were aware of the increasing might of the Englishmen and felt that it posed a challenge to the Dutch interest. As a result, they clashed with the English from 1665 till 1667. At the end of the Second Anglo War, the Dutch had to give up all their settlements in India. The last of the Europeans to come in India were the French. The French created the French East India Companies in 1664. One of the prominent contributions of the French was the development of Pondicherry in 1674. The French expansionist policy in India was challenged by the English. These traditional rivals fought with each other in three Carnatic wars to establish supremacy in the subcontinent. This period also shows the diplomatic abilities of Robert Clive, a commander in the British East India Company. His rule was pivotal in defeating the French during the Third Carnatic War. Robert Clive also battled against Rajadollah, the Nawab of Bengal, and his friends' support at the Dalhousie in 1757. Clive's decisive victory of the Battle of Dalhousie gave the British East India Company control over Bengal, which was arguably one of the biggest regions back then, and consolidating power in India. The rise of British in India also often attributed to factors such as naval superiority, military skills, discipline, and so on. Still, There were internal factors that facilitated the British, one of the most significant of them being the decline of the Mughals in India. The Mughal Empire had expanded to such an extent the centralized ruling system was ineffective. The unity and stability of empire had been shaken up of long and strong reign of Aurangzeb, yet the administration was still quite efficient, and the Mughal army was quite strong at the time of its death in 1707. Many policies launched by Aurangzeb that largely contributed the rise to the regional conflicts. Many rulers after Aurangzeb lacked strong leadership qualities and corruption was rampant. The invasion of the Nadars in 1739 and multiple invasions of Ahmad Shah Durrani between the US of 1747 and 1769 left a huge blow on the Mughal Empire. This led to the decline of this Mughal Empire. Meanwhile, many other kingdoms such as the Marathas and Mysore and Sikhs, Bengal and Hyderabad had arisen. These kingdoms further engaged in succession wars for Mughal throne. The association of the Europeans in regional politics and succession wars accelerated the decline of the Mughals. In addition to the decline of the Mughals, winning the Carnatic War and the Battle of the Dalhousie gave the British a strong hold in the subcontinent. Their victories allowed the British East India Company to appoint puppet rulers in Bengal, Carnatic, and etc. Bengal, however, was their crown jewel. In 1759, the Dutch and puppet Nawab of Bengal, Mir Zafar attempted to recover Bengal, but the Dutch forces were bested by the British in the Battle of Chinsura. By 1764, Nawab of Bengal, Mir Qasim, Nawab of Awadh, Shuja Rajadaulah, and Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II conspired to recover Bengal from the English. The combined army lost to the English in the Battle of Buxar, and the Mughal Empire became a pensioner of the East India Company. In 1765, the Treaty of Allahabad was signed at the end of the particular war. As per the treaty, Mir Qasim handed over the regions of Midapur, Bardhaman, and Chittagong to the English for maintaining the army and also permitted duty-free trade in Bengal. Meanwhile, Mughal Emperor Shah Alam II gave the English the Diwani of Bengal, Bihar, and Orissa. After the Battle of Buxar, British established a dual form of government in Bengal by which Diwani, or power to collect taxes, was carried out by the company, and Nizamat, that is the police and judicial matters, by the Nawab. Essentially, the Nawab had to depend on the English to maintain the orders and peace in the state, but the dual government system was ineffective, as the Nawab and the company had neglected in the public welfare of the state. Hence, when Warren Hastings became the governor of the Fort William in Bengal, he abolished the dual government system and remodeled the administration. Warren Hastings was appointed to rule by the Regulating Act of 1773. This act brought about the British government involvement in Indian affairs in the effect of control and regulate the functions of the East Indian Company. It recognized that the company rule in India extended beyond the trade to administrative and political fields. It introduced judicial reforms as well by setting up the first Supreme Court. Warren Hastings also brought effective means of tax collections between 1772 and 1774. In 1774, he acquired a new title as the Governor General of British East Indian Company, supervising all English settlements in India. Meanwhile, In the south, British might challenged by the Mysore kingdom led by Hyder Ali and later by his son Tipu Sultan. They fought 4 wars between 1767 and 1799, which were popularly known as the Anglo-Mysore Wars. The British fought the first 2 wars against Hyder Ali. Tipu Sultan continued the war after the untimely death of the Hyder Ali during the Second War, faced forces sent by Lord Wellesley IV. From time to time, neighboring kingdoms such as Marathas, Nawab of Carnatic, and Nizams of Hyderabad aligned with the British to subdue the Mysore rulers. Governor General Lord Wellesley managed to give support over the Nizam of Hyderabad to the subsidiary alliance to defeat Tipu Sultan in 1799 and place a young Bhutia ruler as their puppet. The subsidiary alliance was truly introduced by the Lord Wellesley during his governorship 1798-1880 and 5. Indian rulers had to pay subsidy to the British to maintain the army. In return, the British would protect them from their enemies, both internal and external. But through this alliance, Indian rulers also lost their sovereignty over their territories to the British. The Nawab of Awadh was the first ruler to take up the subsidiary alliance after the Battle of Buxar. However, the Nizam of Hyderabad was the first to accept a well-framed subsidiary alliance. Tanjore was another prominent region to become a part of the alliance. The Marathas, they also became victims of this alliance. During the reign of Chhatrapati Shahu, the 5th Chhatrapati Maratha Empire, Baroda, Nagpur, Indore, Sindhya, Gwalior, Pune came to prominence, and the empire evolved into confederations. The confederacy was under the Peshwa's rule and worked well until the Third Battle of Panipat in 1761. The defeat at the Panipat and the death of the Peshwa Madhura I in 1772 weakened the control of the Peshwas over the confederacy. While each family ruled independently with a united front against the British, they often tended to quarrel among themselves. The Marathas and the British engaged in 3 wars from the 1775 to 1818, which led the British control Mandro members of the Maratha Empire one by one. Finally, 1818, the British took control of the Maratha territory and abolished the Peshwaship. Sindh joined the subsidiary alliance in 1839, which gave British considerable control over the region. Although the British had assured territorial integrity to the armies of the Sindh, annexed the region after the brief campaign of the Baisalchas Napier in 1843. Meanwhile, the Sikhs tried to keep the British at bay and both engaged in all-out wars and between 1845 to 1849, called the Anglo-Sikh Wars. The British annexed Punjab and the war endured with some 6 squadrons eventually fighting alongside with British in the US to come. Lord Dalhousie, the Governor General from 1848 to 1856, used the doctrine of lapse to annex many regions. As per the doctrine, if a ruler of princely state controlled by the British died without a male heir, the British would gain control over the territory, while the adopted son of the ruler got the right for the ruler's private property. The British had final say in destroying state to adopt the son annexing it. The states such as Satara, Jhansi, and Nagpur, Bhagat, and Udaipur and Sambalpur lost the control to the doctrine. While many frustratingly become the part of the British Empire, accepting these rules, some of them resented the policies and administration of the British from the beginning. The Revolt of 1857, the prominent example. The revolt began in Meerut on 10th May 1857, and the immediate cause was a refusal by the sepoys to use the greased cartridges in field rifles provided by the British Army. Before this, Mughal Pandan, a sepoy of the 34th Native Infantry, attacked British officers and Barrelpur 29th March 1857. Causes of the revolt, a cumulative effect of the British expansion policy and economic exploitations and administrative changes over the years that had adversely affected all rulers of Indian state, sepoys and zamindars, peasants, traders, artisans and pandits and mold-wheels, etc. The revolt rippled across the country, especially Delhi, Meerut, Lucknow and Kanpur. Thus, the event is considered the first war of independence by many Indian nationalists and historians, although the imperial loyalists call it the Sepoy Mutiny. While the revolt produced regional leaders like Nana Sahib and Rani Lakshmibai, the British were also able to capitalize the lack of a strong single leadership and in the reign of the last Mughal Emperor Bahadur Zafar. Queen Victoria declared the Empress of India through the Government of India Act in 1858. East Indian Company transformed the control of the India to the British Crown. India fell under the direct rule of the British. By 1859, the British managed to quell the rebellion in the different parts of the country, essentially re-establishing their authority over India. Apart from the subsidiary alliance and the doctrine of lapse, the British introduced many policies to control the Indian kingdoms. In 1784, British India Act was introduced to distinguish between the commercial and political functions of the company. This act gave the British government to supreme control over the company's affairs and administration in India. The enactment of Charter Act was done in every 20 years from 1793 to 1853. This was another step that led the British East India Company extend its control over the British territory in India. Further, acts gave more power to the British by opening trades from the company to all British subjects and expanding the Governor-General jurisdictions from the Bengal and the most of India. Another important step taken by the British was a permanent settlement introduced by Lord Cornwallis in Bengal and Bihar in 1793. This regulation recognized the Mindars as the owners of the land, and the peasants were reduced to mere status, major traders of tenant. While these acts strengthened the British control over the India, some British policies developed elements of a modern state in India. And a prominent example of such policies is the abolition of the sati in 1829. It was passed by the first Governor General of India, Lord William Bentinck, with the efforts of Raja Ram Mohan Roy and other Indian social reformers. Bentinck also enforced the prohibition of the female infanticide, which was then prevalent among some Rajput clans and other castes. In 1856, the British passed an act that allowed Hindu widows to remarry. The passing of this act can be attributed to the prolonged efforts of social reformers like Pandit Ishwar Chandra Vidyasagar. Another area of social upliftment that the British revolutionized was education. The Charter Act of 1813, directed by the company, sanctioned a 1 lakh rupee annually for encouraging Indians in education and promoting the knowledge of modern sciences. This was further encouraged in the famous Lord Macaulay's Millet of 1835, which favored teaching of Western sciences and literature through the English language alone. Another major impact on education in India was when George Wood, the Secretary of State, sent out an educational dispatch in 1854. The dispatch suggested the government of India should take the responsibility of educating the masses in India. It proposed the use of vernacular languages to impart education in primary schools and English as a medium to instructions in higher education. The significance of Wood's dispatch was that it gave impetus to establish departments of the education and universities in Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras by 1857.